The letter arrived on a Tuesday, carried by a diplomatic courier drone that hummed through the humidity of our colony's main square. My hands trembled as I signed for it, my name glowing on the drone's display. Kira Vance. It read, by order of the Galactic Concord Academy Admissions Committee. I was 17 years old, born on a frontier colony called New Hope that barely had a name on most star charts. My parents were terraformers, people who spent their lives turning dead worlds into living ones. They had given me the stars as a birthright, but I never imagined I would actually reach them. The Academy acceptance was a dream I had carried since childhood, a dream I had hidden from everyone because it seemed too impossible. Humans were still newcomers to the Galactic Concord. We had only been members for 50 years. Barely a blink in galactic time. The Academy had accepted humans before, but not many, and none from a dust colony like New Hope. I read the letter 7 times before I let myself believe it. Dear applicant Kira Vance. It read, we are pleased to inform you that your application to the Galactic Concord Academy has been approved. Your scores in xenocultural studies and diplomatic theory were noted as exceptional. We look forward to welcoming you to our incoming class. My mother cried. My father hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. My little brother ran through the house shouting that his sister was going to the stars. That night, I stood on the roof of our habitation dome and looked up at the sky. The stars above New Hope were bright, unblemished by atmospheric pollution. I had spent countless nights staring at them, wondering what was out there. Now I was going to find out. The transport ship arrived 3 weeks later. It was a Concorde carrier, massive and sleek, its hull bearing the insignia of the Academy. I boarded with a single bag and a head full of hopes. As the ship lifted off, I watched my homeworld shrink to a speck, then disappear into the vastness of space. I did not cry. I was too excited to cry. But I was also afraid. Not of the Academy, not of the challenges ahead. I was afraid of being seen as weak. I was afraid of being seen as just a human, a member of a species that had barely earned its place among the stars. I promised myself that I would prove them wrong. Whatever it took, whoever I had to face, I would prove that a human belonged at the Academy. I just did not know how soon that promise would be tested. I spent my last night on New Hope walking through the colony. The domes were old, their surfaces scarred by decades of dust storms and solar radiation. But inside, they were alive. Families ate dinner together. Children played in the communal gardens. Engineers worked on the life support systems that kept us all breathing. This was my world, a small world, by galactic standards. A world of terraformers and dreamers. People who had given up comfortable lives on Earth to build something new on a frontier. I walked past the school where I had first learned about the stars. Past the observatory where I had spent countless nights watching the sky. Past the small memorial my father had helped build, dedicated to the colonists who had died making New Hope livable. I was leaving all of this behind. Not because I did not love it, but because I needed to see what else was out there. The transport ship arrived at dawn. It was a Concorde vessel, its hull painted with the insignia of the Academy. It descended through the thin atmosphere on a column of plasma, landing on the new pad that had been built specifically for this purpose. I was the only passenger from New Hope, the only one who had been accepted. The weight of that settled on my shoulders as I walked toward the boarding ramp. My father hugged me first. His arms were strong, calloused from years of manual labor. Be brave, he said. My mother held my face in her hands. Make us proud, she said. My little brother just cried. I boarded the ship without looking back. Looking back would have broken my resolve. The ship lifted off. Through the viewport, I watched New Hope shrink to a dot, then disappear into the blue of the atmosphere, then vanish entirely as we entered the black. The other passengers on the ship were from various worlds. I kept to myself for the first few days. Watching. Learning. A group of Cathari students practiced a ritual I did not recognize. Two ceruleans debated philosophy in rapid-fire galactic standard. A graviton floated through the corridors like a ghost. I felt small among them. But I also felt alive. Every moment was new. Every sight was unexpected. I was leaving my world behind. But I was gaining the universe. And that trade, I decided, was worth every moment of fear. The journey took 3 days. I spent most of it in my cabin, reading the Academy handbook, studying the holographic maps of the campus, trying to prepare myself for what was coming. But preparation was impossible. How could anyone prepare for the reality of 100 alien species living and learning together? I gave up trying and simply watched out the viewport as the stars flowed past like a river of light. Each step of this journey had been a leap of faith. I had trusted the universe to carry me. And it had. Not gently, but truly. I would carry that lesson with me forever. The Academy was not a single building. It was a city of knowledge, spread across a cluster of asteroids that orbited a blue-white star. Spires of crystal and metal pierced the void, connected by bridges of light that pulsed with energy. Domes covered entire ecosystems, each one a carefully maintained environment for a different species. The transport ship docked at the main hub, and I stepped into a corridor that was wider than any street on New Hope. The ceiling arched overhead, transparent in sections, showing the stars beyond. Beings of every shape and size moved through the space. Ceruleans with shimmering blue skin. Cathari with elegant antennae that twitched with every sound. Aquilans with feathers that caught the light like jewels. And species I had no name for. Beings that defied categorization. A creature that looked like a floating crystal drifted past, its surface refracting light into rainbows. A being made of what appeared to be living stone walked with heavy, deliberate steps. I stared. I could not help it. I had studied xenology my whole life. But textbooks could not prepare you for the reality of 100 species moving through a single space. A friendly Cathari student noticed my expression and laughed. A sound like wind chimes. First day? They asked. I nodded. It gets easier, they said. Eventually you stop noticing. But I hoped that day would never come. I wanted to notice everything. I found my quarters. A small room with a viewport that looked out at the asteroid field. I unpacked my single bag and sat on the bed, trying to absorb the reality of where I was. A chime announced my roommate. Her name was Liara, a cerulean from a water world called Oceania. Her skin shimmered with patterns of green and blue as she introduced herself, the colors shifting with her emotions. You are human, she said. It was not a question. Yes, I said. I have never met a human before. She said, your species is very warm. I laughed, and she smiled. And in that moment I knew that I had made at least one friend. The first day was overwhelming. The second day was better. By the third day, I had learned the routes to my classes, the names of my professors, and the locations of the best places to eat. I had also started to notice the way some beings looked at me. Not with curiosity, like Liara, but with something else. Something that felt like judgment. I tried to ignore it, but it was only the beginning. Liara and I stayed up late that first night, talking about our homes, our families, our dreams. She came from Oceania, a water world where cities floated on the surface and bioluminescent creatures lit the depths. She had 7 siblings, each one scattered across different worlds, pursuing different paths. I am the first in my family to attend the academy, she said. My parents are proud, but they do not understand why anyone would leave the water. I laughed. My parents are the same, I said. They built a world. They do not understand why I want to leave it. Because there is more, Liara said. There is always more. That became our mantra. Whenever the overwhelm became too much, whenever I felt like an imposter, she would look at me and say there is more. And I would remember why I was here. The first week was a blur of orientation sessions, registration forms, and introductions. I learned my way around the main hub, a massive structure that connected the various asteroids via a network of light bridges. Each bridge was a tube of energy that carried passengers in zero gravity. A feeling that took me days to get used to. I visited the xenobiology gardens, where plants from 100 worlds grew in carefully controlled environments. I saw trees that glowed, flowers that sang, fungi that communicated through chemical signals. I stood in the observation dome and watched an asteroid drift past, close enough to see the craters on its surface. I met students from species I had never heard of, a Ventari who communicated through color changes on their skin, a Xylos who was made of crystalline silicon, their body refracting light like a prism, a Zephyrian who was composed of gas, held together by a containment field. Each encounter expanded my understanding of what life could be, and each encounter reminded me how small my perspective had been, confined to a single world, a single species, a single way of being. But I was learning. Every day, I was learning, and that was the point. I learned that the Cathari had a tradition of sharing stories through song, their antennae weaving patterns in the air as they sang. I learned that the Ceruleans communicated emotions through skin patterns, a language older than speech. I learned that the Gravitan had no concept of linear time, experiencing past and present as a single continuous moment. Every conversation was a lesson. Every interaction was an education. The diversity of the academy was its greatest strength. Every species brought a unique perspective, a different way of seeing the universe. I was lucky to witness even a fraction of it. My first class was Xenocultural Ethics, taught by a Gravitan professor named Dr. Solon. The professor hovered slightly above the ground as they spoke, their voice a soft hum that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. The classroom was a semicircle of floating platforms, each one adjusted to the comfort of its occupant. I sat on a human standard seat, feeling conspicuously ordinary among beings who glowed, floated, and shimmered. The class was a mix of species, maybe 30 students in total. I recognized Ceruleans, Cathari, Aquilans, and I noticed one being who commanded attention simply by existing. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and thick limbs. His skin was a dark reddish-brown, textured like volcanic rock. 2 curved horns rose from his forehead, and his eyes were yellow, with vertical pupils. He was a Carthian, a species from a high-gravity world known for producing warriors. He sat at the back of the classroom, his arms crossed, his expression one of barely concealed boredom. His name, I would later learn, was Vorath. Dr. Solon began the lecture on cross-species communication ethics. They spoke about the importance of understanding cultural context, about the dangers of imposing your own framework on another species' behavior. I took notes, fascinated. Halfway through the lecture, Dr. Solon asked a question about ethical relativism. I raised my hand and gave an answer that referenced Cerulean communication patterns, something I had studied extensively on New Hope. Dr. Solon nodded approvingly. An excellent perspective, Miss Vance. A snort came from the back of the room. I turned. Vorath was looking at me with obvious disdain. A human, he said, lecturing us on ethics. That is almost amusing. The class went quiet. Dr. Solon's voice was calm. Is there something you would like to share, Mr. Vorath? He shrugged, his massive shoulders lifting and falling. Only that humans have been part of the Concord for 50 years. My species has been part of it for 3,000. I do not think a human has anything to teach us about ethics. My face burned. But I did not respond. Not because I was scared, though I was, but because I knew that responding would only confirm his belief that humans were emotional and irrational. So I stayed silent. But I remembered. And I waited. I started to notice the patterns. Vorith's comments came most frequently during group discussions. When the floor was open to anyone, he would wait until I was mid-sentence, then interrupt with a loud correction or a dismissive laugh. He targeted my species, my homeworld, my lack of galactic experience. Each comment was a small cut, barely noticeable on its own, but they accumulated. I started to dread class. I started to sit in the back, hoping to go unnoticed. But Vorith always found me. One day, Dr. Solon assigned a group project. We were to analyze a historical first contact scenario and present our findings. The groups were assigned randomly. Of course, Vorith ended up in my group. The moment the assignment was announced, he stood up and walked over to the professor. I request a different group, he said. Dr. Solon's voice was calm. On what grounds? I do not wish to work with a human, Vorith said. They have no history of diplomacy, no understanding of galactic protocols. Working with one would compromise my grade. The classroom went silent. I felt every eye on me. Dr. Solon regarded Vorith with an expression I could not read. The Academy does not grant group transfers based on species preference, they said. You will work with your assigned group. Vorith's face darkened. He returned to his seat without looking at me, but I felt his anger radiating across the room. After class, he cornered me in the hallway. His followers formed a wall behind him, blocking my path. You think you belong here, he said. You do not. You are a mistake that the Academy has not yet corrected. I will make sure everyone sees it. He pushed past me, his shoulder colliding with mine hard enough to knock me against the wall. I stood there, breathing hard. As they walked away, a Cathari student I did not know stopped to check on me. Are you all right? They asked. I nodded, even though I was not. That was when I started to realize that ignoring Vorith was not working. Something had to change. The group project became my personal challenge. I worked twice as hard as anyone else, researching voraciously, contributing constantly. Vorith could not complain about my work quality, no matter how much he wanted to. By the end of the project, even he had to acknowledge that my contribution was valuable. He did it grudgingly, through gritted teeth, but he did it. It was a small victory, but I treasured it. Vorith's prejudice was a wall I had to climb, but walls could be scaled, and on the other side was a view I would never have seen otherwise. Every obstacle was an opportunity in disguise. Over the following weeks, Vorith's comments became a daily ritual. It was never overt enough to warrant official action, just constant, grinding dismissals. When I answered a question correctly, he would mutter something about luck. When I made a mistake, he would chuckle loudly. When I spoke about human culture, he would interrupt with corrections based on what he called actual history. The worst part was that some other students joined him. Not all, but enough. A group of students from warrior species, who seemed to take Vorith's lead. They laughed at his jokes. They echoed his dismissals. They made me feel like an outsider in a place where I had fought so hard to belong. Liara noticed. She would squeeze my arm under the table when Vorith's comments hit particularly hard. My Cathari friend Thess, who I had met in the dining hall, would change the subject when the tension became too much. But even their support could not fully shield me. One day, Vorith went further. We were in the training yard, a massive open space where students could practice physical skills. I was working on a low-gravity exercise when Vorith approached, flanked by two of his followers. He looked down at me, his yellow eyes narrowing. You know, he said, I do not understand why they let humans into the academy. You are fragile. Your bones are brittle. Your muscles are weak. In a real confrontation, you would last maybe 3 seconds. I stood up straight, meeting his gaze. Is there a point to this? I asked. He smiled, revealing teeth that were pointed. The point is that you do not belong here. You are taking the spot of someone who could actually contribute. Someone with strength. Someone with worth. The word hung in the air between us. Worth. He was questioning my worth. I felt anger rise in my chest. Hot and sharp, but I controlled it. I had learned long ago that anger made humans seem irrational to other species. It confirmed their biases. So I took a breath. I will let my work speak for itself, I said, and I turned and walked away. His laughter followed me across the training yard. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The doubts crept in. What if he was right? What if I did not belong here? What if being human was simply not enough? I pushed the thoughts away. But they lingered, like a splinter I could not remove. The training yard became my refuge. I went there every evening, running through basic exercises, trying to burn off the frustration that built up during the day. The yard was a massive dome, 300 feet across, with adjustable gravity and environmental controls. Students used it for everything from meditation to full-contact combat. I usually stuck to the running track, staying out of everyone's way. But one evening, I was too distracted to notice where I was going. I accidentally walked into the middle of a sparring session. A massive aquilon knocked me to the ground with a stray wing. I hit the mat hard. The wind knocked out of me. The aquilon helped me up, apologizing profusely, but the damage was done. Vorith had seen the whole thing from across the yard. He walked over, his followers trailing behind him. Look, he said, the human falls down. How appropriate. I got to my feet, brushing myself off. I did not respond. Silence. He said, the human has learned silence. That is progress. Maybe there is hope for your kind after all. His followers laughed. I turned and walked away. But I could hear them laughing behind me for the rest of the evening. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The doubts were louder than ever. Maybe he was right. Maybe humans were too fragile, too new, too unprepared for the galactic stage. Maybe I was wasting everyone's time, including my own. I thought about my parents, about how proud they had been when I left. I thought about my little brother, who wanted to follow in my footsteps. I thought about all the humans who would come after me, who would be judged by how I handled myself here. I could not quit, not because I was brave, but because too many people were counting on me. I made a decision. I would not avoid Vorith anymore. I would not stay silent. I would face him, whatever the consequences. The next morning, I walked into the dining hall with my head held high. I sat at a table in the center of the room, where everyone could see me. Vorith was there, surrounded by his followers. I met his eyes and did not look away. He smirked and said something to his friends. But I did not care. I was done hiding. I started spending more time in the xenobiology gardens. The plants were calming, their alien beauty a reminder that the universe was full of wonders I had yet to discover. I would sit among the glowing flora and practice my breathing, centering myself before each day's challenges. The gardens became my sanctuary, a place where Vorith's words could not reach me. The xenobiology gardens became my classroom away from class. I learned as much from the plants as from any textbook. They taught me patience, resilience, and the beauty of adaptation. The breaking point came on a day that started like any other. I was in the dining hall, eating breakfast with Liara and Thess. When Vorith and his group entered, they were louder than usual, their voices carrying across the room. Vorith was recounting a training exercise from his combat class. He had apparently defeated 3 opponents in a row. His audience was appropriately impressed. Then he noticed me. He walked over to our table. his followers trailing behind him like a wake. He stopped in front of me and looked down. The human, he said. Still here. I did not look up. Still here, I said. He leaned closer. I heard that your species has a saying. He said. Something about sticks and stones. But words can never hurt you. Is that right? I finally looked up. That is the saying, I said. He smiled. Then you will not mind if I say that your presence here is an insult to every species that earned its place in the Concord. That your kind is barely a generation removed from barbarism. That your colony was probably a mistake. And that you are living proof of that mistake. The dining hall had gone silent. Every eye was on us. Liara's skin had gone dark. A sign of distress in ceruleans. Thessa's antennae were flat against their head. I stood up slowly. Vorith was a foot taller than me. His horns cast shadows across my face. But I did not step back. You have a lot to say about humans, I said. But you have never actually fought one. Have you? He laughed. Why would I fight an insect? Then I said the words that changed everything. Because I am challenging you to the trial of worth. The silence in the room deepened. The trial of worth was an ancient academy tradition. A formal contest between students to settle disputes. It was rarely invoked. And when it was, the results were public and binding. Vorith stared at me. His smile faded. You are serious, he said. I am serious, I said. If I win, you stop. No more comments. No more harassment. You treat me and every other human with respect. And if you win? He asked. I will withdraw from the academy. Liara gasped. Thess made a sound of protest, but I held Vorith's gaze. If you win, I said, I will leave. And I will never come back. Vorith was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled again. Wider this time. You have a deal. Human. The trial is set for 1 month from today. I suggest you use that time wisely. He turned and walked away. His followers laughing. I sat back down. My legs shaking. What have I done? I whispered. Liara took my hand. You have done something very brave, she said. Or very stupid. I am not sure which yet. Neither was I. The dining hall was frozen. Students who had been eating, talking, laughing, had all stopped to watch the confrontation between the human and the Carthian. I could feel the weight of their attention pressing down on me. But I did not waver. Vorith's smile had faded. He was studying me with new eyes. Reassessing. You are serious, he said again, as if saying it twice would make it more real. I am serious, I said, unless you are afraid. The word hung in the air. Afraid. A challenge to a Carthian's honor. His eyes narrowed. I am afraid of nothing, he said, especially not a human. Then you accept, I said. He straightened to his full height, towering over me. I accept, he said. 1 month. The training yards. The trial of worth. He leaned down, bringing his face close to mine. I hope you have said your goodbyes, human, because when this is over, you will be going home. He turned and strode out of the dining hall, his followers scrambling after him. The room remained silent for a moment, then erupted into chaos. Students crowded around me, asking questions, offering advice, expressing disbelief. I answered none of them. I sat down at my table, my legs suddenly weak. Liara sat across from me, her skin pale with worry. What did you just do? She asked. I told you I was done hiding, I said. This is not hiding. This is jumping off a cliff and hoping you learn to fly on the way down. She shook her head. That is a terrible metaphor. I know, I said, but it is the only one I have. The news spread faster than I could have imagined. By the end of the day, I had received messages from students I had never met. Some offered support, some offered advice, some simply said they were watching, and that they hoped I knew what I was doing. I did not know what I was doing, But I could not admit that. I had made my choice. Now I had to live with it. Master Silen found me in my quarters that evening. She did not knock. She simply appeared in my doorway, her antennae scanning the room. I have been asked to train you, she said, by your cerulean friend. I was not aware I had a choice in the matter. I stood up. You do, I said, but I hope you will say yes. She regarded me for a long moment. You move like someone who has never been in a real fight, she said. Your stance is wrong. Your instincts are untrained. You would last approximately 10 seconds against a Carthian. I felt my heart sink. But, she continued, you have something that cannot be taught. You have the willingness to stand up when it would be easier to sit down. That is the foundation of all combat. The rest can be learned. She turned and walked away. Be at the training hall tomorrow at dawn, she said over her shoulder. Do not be late. I was not late. The official paperwork for the trial of Worth was surprisingly bureaucratic. I filled out forms, signed waivers, and selected witnesses. The administrator, an elderly Gravitan, looked at me with ancient eyes. You understand the consequences? They asked. I understand, I said. They nodded slowly. Then I wish you luck, Miss Vance. You will need it. I appreciated their honesty. Filing the challenge was the hardest thing I had ever done. But the moment I pressed submit, I felt a strange peace. Whatever happened next, I had chosen my path with courage and conviction. The news spread through the academy like fire through dry grass. By the end of the day, everyone knew. A human had challenged a Carthian to the trial of Worth. The reactions were mixed. Some students looked at me with new respect. Others with pity. Most with curiosity. Like I was an experiment they were watching unfold. Vorith's followers made sure everyone knew the stakes. If I lost, I would leave the academy. The human would be gone. The message was clear. This was not just about me. It was about all humans. That night, I sat in my room staring at the wall. The reality of what I had done settled over me like a weight. I had bet my entire future on a single confrontation. Liara came in without knocking. She sat beside me without speaking for a long time. Finally she said, "Do you have a plan?" I laughed bitterly. A plan? No. I have no plan. I have never been in a real fight in my life. The most dangerous thing on New Hope was a dust storm. Liara was quiet. Then she said, "Vorith is strong. But strength is not everything. I have seen you in class. You are quick. You are clever. You notice things others miss. That is a kind of strength too." I appreciated her words. But they felt hollow. Vorith had been training for combat his entire life. His species evolved on a world with 3 times Earth's gravity. What was I thinking? I was thinking that I could not take it anymore. I said. The comments. The dismissals. The way he looked at me like I was less than nothing. I had to do something. Liara nodded. I understand, she said, but now you need to turn that something into a plan. And I know someone who can help. She led me to a part of the academy I had never visited. A training hall tucked away in a quiet corridor, lit by soft blue light. In the center, a Cathari woman was practicing movements that looked like a cross between dance and combat. Her antennae moved in precise patterns as she flowed through the forms. This is Master Silen, Liara said. She is the best combat instructor in the academy. And she owes me a favor. Master Silen stopped her movements and turned to face me. Her eyes were ancient, holding depths of experience that made me feel young and small. You are the human, she said, the one who challenged Vorith. I nodded. She studied me for a long moment. Then she said, you are smaller than I expected. And probably slower than you think you are. But that does not mean you cannot win. It just means you cannot fight like a Carthian. You need to fight like a human. I did not know what that meant. But I was about to find out. Master Silen was a demanding teacher. She pushed me to my limits and then beyond, forcing me to confront weaknesses I did not know I had. The first week was pure torture. She made me run laps until my lungs burned. She made me hold positions until my muscles screamed. She made me repeat the same movements hundreds of times until they became automatic. Why do I need to learn this? I asked one day, exhausted and frustrated. Because your body must know what to do before your mind has time to think. She said, in a fight, thinking is too slow. You must react. And reaction comes from repetition. So we repeated, and repeated, and repeated. By the end of the second week, I could dodge a training drone's attacks without conscious thought. By the end of the third week, I could counterattack. Master Cylon taught me about Carthian anatomy. Their size makes them powerful, but also gives them a higher center of gravity. They are vulnerable to low attacks, to strikes aimed at the knees and ankles. Their thick hide protects them from blunt force, but their joints are exposed. Their necks, their armpits, the backs of their knees. These are the targets you must aim for, she said, but you will only get one chance. If you miss, he will not give you a second. I trained until my body was covered in bruises. I trained until I could barely walk. But I also trained until I stopped being afraid. Not of Vorith, of failing. One evening, Master Cylon sat down beside me after a particularly brutal session. You are ready, she said, not because you are stronger than him. You are not, but because you understand something he does not. What is that? I asked. That winning is not about being the best, she said. It is about being the one who refuses to lose. She stood up and walked away, leaving me alone in the training hall. I sat there for a long time, letting her words sink in. The trial was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to become the person I needed to be. I went to bed that night and slept more deeply than I had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up ready. Master Cylon had a saying. The body follows the mind. If you believe you can win, your body will find a way. If you believe you will lose, your body will fail before the fight begins. I repeated this to myself every morning, every evening, every moment of doubt. I trained my mind as hard as I trained my body, building a fortress of belief that Vorith's arrogance could not breach. Master Cylon told me that fear was not the enemy. Fear was a signal. It meant you cared about the outcome. The trick was not to eliminate fear, but to use it as fuel for your determination. Master Cylon's training was unlike anything I had experienced. She did not teach me to be stronger. She taught me to be smarter. The Carthians, she explained, were a species built for brute force. They evolved on a high-gravity world where physical strength was the primary determinant of survival. Their combat style was based on overwhelming power. They charged, they crushed, they dominated, but they had weaknesses. Their size made them slower. Their strength made them predictable. And their confidence made them arrogant. If you can make Vorith angry, Master Cylon said, he will make mistakes. The key is to survive long enough for that to happen. She taught me to move, not to block, but to dodge, not to meet force with force, but to redirect it. She taught me to use the environment, to exploit every advantage, to fight not with my muscles but with my mind. We trained for hours every day. My body ached in ways I did not know were possible. My muscles screamed, my bones protested, but I kept going. Liara joined me for some sessions, learning the movements alongside me. Thes provided moral support. Other students began to trickle in, offering tips and encouragement. A gravitan showed me how to adjust my center of gravity in low-G environments. An Aquilon taught me breathing techniques to maintain calm under pressure. I realized something that surprised me. I was not alone. The students who had been silent before, who had watched Vorith's harassment without intervening, were now finding their voices. They believed in me, or at least, They believed in the idea of someone standing up to a bully. 2 weeks into training, Master Silent stopped me mid-movement. "You are still thinking," she said. "You are planning your moves instead of trusting your instincts. That will get you killed." I was frustrated. "I do not know how to stop thinking," I said. "That is your human advantage," she said. "You think. Vorith does not. But thinking must become action. There cannot be a gap between the two." She made me practice the same sequence of movements for 6 hours. By the end, I could do them without thinking. My body knew what to do before my mind caught up. "Good," Master Silent said. "Now you are beginning to understand." 3 weeks passed. I was not the same person who had entered that training hall. I was stronger, faster, more confident, but I was also terrified. The trial was 1 week away. And despite everything, I did not know if I was ready. The support I received surprised me. Students I had never spoken to approached me in the corridors, offering tips and encouragement. A gravitan named Saul showed me how to use low gravity to my advantage, teaching me to push off surfaces in ways that would confuse a heavier opponent. An Aquilon named Kale helped me with my breathing, teaching me a technique that kept my heart rate steady even under stress. A Cathari named Thes gave me a small charm that they said would bring luck. It is made from the antenna of a wise elder. They said, it has never failed. I wore it around my neck. Liara was with me every step of the way. She woke me up each morning, made sure I ate, dragged me to training when I wanted to quit. When I doubted myself, she reminded me why I had started. When I was scared, she held my hand. "You are the bravest person I know," she told me one night. "Not because you are not afraid. Because you are afraid and you keep going anyway." Vorith, meanwhile, seemed unconcerned. I saw him in the dining hall, laughing with his followers, his confidence unshaken. He did not train. He did not prepare. Why would he? He was a Carthian. I was a human. The outcome was obvious. That was his weakness. He had already decided he would win. He had not considered the possibility that he might lose. I held on to that thought. It was my secret weapon. The night before the trial, a message arrived at my quarters. It was from Vorith. It contained a single word. Tomorrow. I did not respond. I did not need to. Tomorrow would speak for itself. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running through every movement I had learned. I imagined the fight. I imagined his attacks. I imagined my responses. I imagined victory. And I imagined defeat. I accepted both possibilities. And in accepting them, I freed myself from fear. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would face it. I had already won the most important battle. The battle against my own doubt. The morning of the trial, I woke before dawn. I lay in the darkness, listening to Liara's soft breathing, feeling the weight of the day ahead. I thought about quitting. The thought was brief but real. I could withdraw. I could apologize. I could accept the shame and stay at the academy. But that was not who I was anymore. I got up and got ready. On the morning of the trial, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized. Not a scared girl from New Hope, but a warrior. The academy had changed me. I was ready to show them. The night before the trial, I could not sleep. I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, running through every movement Master Silent had taught me. I imagined Vorith's charge. I imagined my dodge. I imagined the counterattack. But in my imagination, I kept losing. Liara was awake too. I could tell by the way her skin shimmered in the dark. Patterns of worry shifting across her surface. "You are thinking too much," she said. "That is what Master Silent said. Master Silent is wise," Liara said. She sat up, her bioluminescent skin casting a soft glow across the room. "I have something for you." She handed me a small device. A data chip etched with cerulean script. "What is this?" I asked. A record of every Carthian combat style that has been documented by the Academy. She said. I accessed it from the archives. I thought it might help. I stared at her. Liara. This is probably restricted. Probably. She agreed. But you are my friend. And I believe in you. I inserted the chip into my datapad and scrolled through the files. Patterns emerged. Carthian combat was indeed predictable. They favored charging attacks, overwhelming force, domination. But there were variations. Vorith's style, according to observation records from his training sessions, was particularly aggressive. He committed to attacks fully, leaving himself exposed if the attack missed. That was my opening, but exploiting it required perfect timing. One mistake, and his counter would crush me. I studied the files until my eyes burned. Then I slept, finally, dreaming of movements and counter-movements. Morning came too fast. I woke to the sound of my alarm and the heavy weight of dread in my stomach. Today was the day. I dressed in my training clothes and made my way to the dining hall. Students parted as I walked, their eyes following me. Some nodded, some whispered, a few offered words of encouragement. Vorith was already there, surrounded by his followers. He looked larger than I remembered, more solid, more dangerous. He caught my eye and smiled, slow and confident. I looked away. I ate breakfast even though I was not hungry. I needed fuel. Thess sat down across from me, their antennae twitching with nervous energy. You have got this, they said. I wish I believed that. I said. You do not have to believe it. Thess said. You just have to do it. Belief comes after. I finished my breakfast. I stood up. I walked toward the training grounds, my heart pounding, my palms sweating. The trial was about to begin. The morning of the trial, the academy felt different. The air was charged, electric with anticipation. Students I passed in the corridors wished me luck. Professors nodded as I walked by. Even Dr. Solon stopped me before class. Miss Vance, they said, whatever happens today, remember that you have already demonstrated more courage than most students show in their entire time here. I thanked them and continued walking. Liara met me at the entrance to the arena. She was holding a small package. I brought you something, she said. I unwrapped it. Inside was a blue band, made of a material that shimmered like Oceania's waters. It is woven from fibers harvested from my homeworld, she said. It is a symbol of protection. I tied it around my wrist. Thank you, I said. She hugged me. Come back in one piece, she said. I will do my best, I said. The arena was full. Students packed the observation platforms, their voices creating a constant hum of sound. Officials stood at the edges of the combat floor, monitors ready to intervene if necessary. The rules were read aloud. No weapons, no lethal force. The contest ends when one participant yields or is unable to continue. Vorith stood across from me, his massive arms crossed, his yellow eyes fixed on mine. He looked relaxed, confident. He cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders, joints popping audibly. I took my position. The official raised their hand. I focused on my breathing, the way Kale had taught me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Steady, calm. The hand dropped. Begin. Vorith did not move immediately. He stood there, studying me, perhaps expecting me to make the first move. I did not. I waited. You have improved, he said. I have been training, I said. I can tell, he said. Your stance is better. Your breathing is controlled. You are not the same person who walked into my classroom 2 months ago. I was surprised. He had noticed. That changed things. But do not mistake improvement for victory, he said. You are still human, and I am still Carthian. He charged. I was ready. The arena floor was cold beneath my feet. I could feel the texture of the metal through my shoes. Every seam and rivet, I traced a pattern with my toe, grounding myself in the physical reality of the moment. This was real. This was happening. I was about to fight a Carthian in front of the entire academy. And I was not going to run. The official's hand dropped and time slowed. I saw Vorith's muscles tense. I saw his weight shift. I saw the exact moment he committed to his attack. And I was already moving before he did. The arena was a massive circular chamber at the heart of the academy. Its walls rose 100 feet, lined with observation platforms that were already filling with students. The ceiling was transparent, showing the starfield beyond, the blue-white sun casting long shadows across the floor. The floor itself was a smooth metallic surface, marked with concentric circles that designated the combat zones. At the center, 2 lines were drawn, facing each other across 30 feet of open space. I walked to my mark. The crowd's murmur was a wall of sound, hundreds of voices speaking in dozens of languages. I spotted Liara on the front platform, her skin bright with encouragement. Thes was beside her, antennae raised. Master Silen stood alone on a higher platform, her expression unreadable. Vorith entered from the opposite side. The crowd noise shifted, a mix of cheers and respectful silence. He walked to his mark with the confidence of someone who had never lost. He was wearing traditional Carthian combat gear, armored plates across his shoulders and chest. His horns had been polished. Catching the starlight, he looked like a force of nature. I felt very small. A Gravitan official floated to the center of the arena. The rules of the Trial of Worth are simple, they announced. The contest continues until one participant yields or is unable to continue. No weapons. No outside interference. The decision of the officials is final. Do both participants understand? I nodded. Vorith grunted. The official raised their hand. Begin. Vorith moved immediately. He crossed the distance between us in 3 massive strides, his fist swinging in a wide arc aimed at my head. I ducked under it, feeling the wind of his punch pass inches above me. I rolled to the side, putting distance between us. The crowd gasped. I was still standing. Vorith turned, surprised. You got lucky, he said. Maybe, I said, but luck counts. He charged again. This time I was ready. I waited until the last possible moment, then sidestepped, grabbing his extended arm and using his momentum to push him past me. He stumbled, catching himself before he fell. The crowd buzzed. Vorith's face twisted with anger. Stop running, he snarled. Stop missing, I replied. He roared and came at me again. Faster this time. I dodged left, then right, then ducked under a wild swing. I was not landing any hits, but I was surviving, and surviving, Master Silen had taught me, was the first step to winning. Vorith was getting frustrated. His movements were becoming less controlled, more aggressive. He was swinging harder, committing more weight to each attack. He was leaving openings. I just had to be brave enough to take them. Vorith's first attack was a massive overhand punch, aimed at my head. I stepped to the side, letting it pass inches from my face. The force of his swing carried him forward, and I used the opening to strike his ribs. It was not a hard hit, but it was a hit. He grunted and spun around, surprise flickering in his eyes. You are faster than I expected, he said. You are slower than I expected, I replied. He growled and came at me again. This time he led with a combination. A left hook followed by a right straight. I ducked under the hook and sidestepped the straight, positioning myself behind him. I kicked the back of his knee. He stumbled, catching himself before he fell. The crowd erupted. He turned to face me, his expression shifting from confidence to something darker. Anger. Just as Master Silen had predicted. He abandoned technique and came at me with pure aggression, swinging wildly, overcommitting, leaving himself exposed. I dodged. I weaved. I made him miss again and again. Each miss cost him energy. Each dodge gave me confidence. But I was getting tired. My movements were slowing. My reactions were dulling. I could not keep this up forever. I needed to end it. He threw another wild punch. This time, instead of dodging, I stepped inside. I drove my shoulder into his chest, using his own momentum against him. He staggered back, off balance. I followed. I hit him in the throat, the soft spot I had been targeting all along. He choked, gasping for air. I hit him again in the same spot. He fell to one knee. The arena went silent. I stood over him, breathing hard, my fist raised. Yield, I said. He looked up at me. His yellow eyes were wide, not with anger, but with something I had never seen in him before. Respect. I yield, he said. The official's voice rang out. The winner is Kira Vance. The silence broke. The arena filled with sound. I heard Liara screaming my name. I heard Tess cheering. I heard the crowd, hundreds of voices, all calling for me. I stood in the center of the arena, my body aching, my heart pounding, and I let the moment wash over me. I had done it. I had actually done it. I could hear Liara shouting encouragement from the crowd. Her voice cut through the noise, a thread of familiar sound in a sea of chaos. I focused on it, letting it anchor me. Tess was shouting too, their high-pitched voice carrying across the arena. I was not alone. I had never been alone. And that knowledge gave me strength I did not know I had. The roar of the crowd faded into background noise. There was only me, Vorith, and the space between us. Every breath was deliberate. Every movement was intentional. I was fully present for the first time in my life. The fight continued. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Vorith's attacks were relentless, a storm of force and fury. But I was learning his rhythm. Each swing had a tell, a shift in his weight, a flicker in his eyes, a slight drop in his shoulder before a big punch. I dodged. I weaved. I made him miss again and again. The crowd had gone quiet, watching with an intensity that was almost physical. They had expected a quick victory, a crushing defeat. Instead they were watching a dance. Vorith paused, breathing hard. His yellow eyes were fixed on me, burning with frustration. Stand still, he growled. Why would I do that? I asked. Vorith charged again, but this time I did not dodge completely. I let his punch graze my shoulder, using the contact to pivot inside his guard. I drove my elbow into his ribs. It was not a hard hit. Against his armored hide, it probably barely registered, but it was a hit. I had struck first. The crowd erupted. Vorith stared at me, shocked. You hit me, he said. You hit me. I hit you. I agreed. Now what are you going to do about it? He lost control. He came at me with pure rage, abandoning any pretense of technique. He swung wildly, leaving himself completely open. I dodged one punch, then another. Then I stepped inside and hit him again, this time in the throat. He coughed, stumbling back. I followed. I hit him in the knee, making him stagger. I hit him in the side, where I knew Carthian ribs were vulnerable. I hit him again and again, not with power, but with precision. Vorith fell to one knee. The arena was silent. I stood over him, breathing hard, my fists still raised. Yield, I said. He looked up at me, his yellow eyes wide with shock and something else. Something I did not expect. Respect. I yield, he said. The words were quiet, but they carried through the silence. The official floated forward. The winner is Kira Vance. The silence broke. The arena filled with sound. Cheers and applause and voices calling my name. I stood in the center of it all, barely able to process what had happened. I had won. I had actually won. Liara reached me first, throwing her arms around me. You did it, she said. You actually did it. I did it, I repeated. as if saying it would make it real. Vorith was helped to his feet by his followers. He looked at me across the arena floor. His expression was unreadable. Then he nodded. Once. A small gesture that meant more than any words. I nodded back. The trial was over. But something new was beginning. The celebration that night was small but meaningful. Liara, Tess, and a few other friends gathered in my quarters. There was food from Oceania, drink from Cathar, and a dessert that Tess had synthesized from a recipe on their homeworld. It tasted like nothing I had ever experienced. Sweet and spicy and somehow nostalgic. I could not stop replaying the fight in my head. Every dodge, every strike, every moment of decision. I analyzed my mistakes, catalogued my successes, wondered what I could have done better. You need to stop thinking about it, Liara said, handing me a cup of something warm. You won. Enjoy it. I do not know how to enjoy it, I admitted. I have been so focused on the fight that I never thought about what comes after. That is the human condition, Tess said with a smile. Always looking ahead, never appreciating the present. I raised my cup. To the present. Then, I said, to the present. They echoed. We drank. The conversation drifted to other topics. Classes. Professors. Rumors about the next semester. It felt normal. After weeks of tension and fear, normal felt like a luxury. The next morning, I woke up with a sore body and a clear mind. I walked to the dining hall and sat at my usual table. Students nodded at me as they passed. A few stopped to congratulate me. I accepted their words with grace. But I did not let them go to my head. I had won a battle. But the war was far from over. There were still classes to attend. Still knowledge to acquire. Still barriers to break. I was not done proving myself. I had only just begun. Vorith was not at breakfast that morning. I did not see him for the rest of the day. Part of me wondered if I had broken something in him. Something that could not be seen on a medical scanner. But I pushed the thought away. He had made his choices. I had made mine. And I would not apologize for standing up for myself. The next few days blurred together. I was stopped constantly by students who wanted to talk about the fight. Some asked technical questions about my technique. Others simply wanted to shake my hand. A young Cathari approached me with tears in their eyes. You gave me hope, they said. I did not know humans could be so strong. I told them that strength was not about species. It was about heart. The victory was not mine alone. It belonged to every student who had ever been dismissed. Every being who had been judged before they were known. I carried their hopes with me into that arena. The days after the trial were strange. I walked through the academy corridors and students I had never met greeted me by name. Beings who had ignored me before now nodded with respect. The whispers had changed. They were no longer about the human who did not belong. They were about the human who had won. Vorith kept his word. He did not speak to me for the first week. But he also did not speak against me. His followers, without his leadership, gradually stopped their harassment. The atmosphere in the classroom shifted. I was no longer an outsider. I was just another student. And that was all I had ever wanted. Liara and Tess threw a small celebration in our quarters. There was food from a dozen worlds. Music from a dozen more. Students came and went, offering congratulations and stories of their own. I learned that I was not the only one who had faced prejudice. A Cerulean student told me about being dismissed as too emotional. A Gravitan spoke of being seen as too detached. A Cathari shared the pain of being judged by their antennae color. We were all outsiders in some way. That was what made the academy beautiful. A place where outsiders could become insiders. On the third day after the trial, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Vorith. He looked uncomfortable, his massive frame seeming to take up the entire doorway. I tensed, ready for anything. But he did not attack. I came to apologize. He said. The words seemed to cost him physical effort. I did not expect that. I said. Neither did I. He admitted. He shifted his weight. My species values strength above all else. I was raised to believe that weakness is shameful. That those who cannot fight do not deserve respect. You showed me that strength comes in many forms. I did not know what to say. So I said the only thing that felt true. Thank you. He nodded. I do not like humans. He said. But I respect you. And that is more than I have ever given anyone outside my species. He turned to leave, then paused. If anyone gives you trouble, he said, tell them you are under my protection. It was not friendship. It was something rarer. Respect between adversaries. I closed the door and sat down. My heart full. I had come to the academy to learn. But I had learned something that no class could teach. Strength was not about size or power. It was about the willingness to stand up when it would be easier to sit down. A week after the trial, I was in the library studying when a shadow fell over my table. I looked up to find Vorith standing there. His expression neutral. May I sit? He asked. I was too surprised to say no. He sat down across from me, his massive frame making the chair look like a child's toy. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. I have been thinking about what happened. He said. About you. About humans. I waited. I was wrong about you. He said. The words seemed to cost him. I judged you based on your species, not on your merits. That was unfair. I nodded slowly. That is a big admission for a Carthian. I said. He almost smiled. It is a big admission for anyone. He said. But I have been watching you. In class. In the training yard. You work harder than anyone. You ask questions. You challenge assumptions. You do not take shortcuts. I was taught that humans were weak. That your species had not earned its place in the Concord. But I was wrong. Strength is not about physical power alone. It is about determination. And you have more determination than anyone I have ever met. I did not know what to say. Thank you. I finally managed. He stood up. I will not be your friend, he said, but I will be your ally. And I will make sure my people treat you with respect. He turned and walked away, leaving me staring after him. I sat there for a long time, processing what had just happened. The bully who had made my life miserable had just apologized. Not because he had to, but because he had chosen to. That was when I realized that the trial had changed both of us. Not just me, him too. He had learned that humans were not what he had been taught. And I had learned that even the most stubborn prejudices could be broken. It just took someone willing to stand up and prove them wrong. Vorith kept his distance for a while after that conversation. But I noticed subtle changes. He stopped interrupting humans in class. He corrected his followers when they made dismissive comments. He was trying. It was not easy for him. I could see the effort it cost, but he was trying. And that was more than I had ever expected from him. Vorith's apology did not erase the past, but it opened a door to the future. And that was all I could ask for. Progress was measured in small steps, not giant leaps. A month after the trial, something unexpected happened. Vorith approached me in the dining hall. Not to threaten me, to ask for my help. I need to understand human diplomatic protocols, he said. The academy is assigning me to a joint exercise with a human delegation. And I do not want to embarrass myself. I stared at him. You are asking me for help? I am, he said. The words seemed to pain him. I can help you, I said, on one condition. His eyes narrowed. What condition? You stop teaching your followers that humans are inferior. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Agreed. So I spent the next week tutoring Vorith in human customs. It was surreal. Sitting across from the being who had made my first months at the academy a living nightmare. explaining the nuances of human handshakes and eye contact. He was a surprisingly attentive student. He took notes. He asked questions. He made mistakes. And when I corrected him, he did not get angry. He got better. One evening, after a particularly long session, he asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Why did you challenge me?" he asked. "You had to know you would probably lose." "I did not know I would win," I said, "but I knew I could not live with myself if I did not try." He considered this. In Carthian culture, that is the definition of courage. He said, "Acting despite fear, not in the absence of it. I think you are more Carthian than you realize." I laughed. "I am not sure if that is a compliment." "It is," he said, "and I think I finally understand why the Academy accepted you. You earned your place, not because of your scores or your knowledge, but because you have the heart of a warrior." It was the most meaningful compliment I had ever received. Not because it came from a former enemy, but because it came from someone who had no reason to give it. From that day on, Vorith and I were not friends, but we were allies. And in the academy, that was almost as valuable. The months passed. I threw myself into my studies with renewed energy. Xenobiology, astropolitics, quantum linguistics, cross-species ethics. I absorbed knowledge like a sponge, driven by a hunger that I had not known I possessed. My professors noticed. Dr. Solon recommended me for an advanced seminar in diplomatic theory. Master Silon invited me to join a combat study group, where I trained alongside students from a dozen species. I was thriving, but I never forgot where I had come from. I wrote to my parents every week, detailing my experiences, my challenges, my growth. They wrote back with news from New Hope, with stories of my little brother, with words of pride and encouragement. I kept every letter in a drawer next to my bed. One evening, I was sitting in the observation dome, watching the stars, when Liara found me. "You have been quiet lately," she said, settling beside me. "I have been thinking," I said. "About what?" "About how much has changed," I said. "A year ago, I was on New Hope, dreaming of the stars. Now I live among them. I have friends from a dozen worlds. I have faced my fears and won. I am not the same person who left that colony. Is that a good thing?" she asked. "I think so," I said. "I hope so." She took my hand. "It is," she said. "Growth always feels strange at first, but it is the only way forward." We sat in silence, watching the asteroid field drift past the star at the center of the system was setting, casting long shadows across the crystal spires. I thought about Vorith, about how we had gone from enemies to something almost like friends. I thought about Master Silon, who had seen potential in me when I could not see it myself. I thought about Liara, who had believed in me from the beginning. I was surrounded by beings who had helped me become who I was. And I realized that the Academy had given me something more valuable than knowledge. It had given me a family. Not by blood, but by choice. And that, I decided, was worth more than any lesson. I thought about all the beings who had helped me. The Gravitan who taught me about gravity. The Aquilon who taught me to breathe. The Cathari who gave me a lucky charm. Liara, who never left my side. Each of them had contributed to my victory. I was not just Kira Vance standing in that arena. I was the sum of every kindness, every lesson, every moment of support. I realized that belonging was not a destination. It was a practice. Every day I had to choose to belong, to participate, to contribute. Belonging was not given. It was built. 6 months after the trial, I stood on the observation deck of the Academy, watching the stars drift past. Liara floated beside me, her skin shimmering with calm blue patterns. Thes was perched on a ledge nearby, their antennae relaxed. So much had changed. The human who had arrived at the Academy, nervous and eager to prove herself, was not the same person standing here now. I had learned that belonging was not given. It was earned. And it was not earned by being the strongest or the smartest, it was earned by being willing to stand up, to fail, to try again. It was earned by being yourself, even when yourself was not what others expected. I thought about Vorath. We had developed something that surprised us both. Not friendship exactly, but mutual respect. He had stopped seeing humans as weak, and I had stopped seeing Carthians as brutes. We had both grown. That was what the academy was supposed to do. I realized. Not just teach facts and skills, but break down the barriers between species. Force beings from different worlds to see each other as individuals, not stereotypes. I had come to the academy to learn about the stars, but I had learned more about myself. I had learned that courage was not the absence of fear. It was fear that had been channeled into action. I had learned that the opinions of others only had power if you let them. And I had learned that a human from a dust colony could stand among the greatest beings in the galaxy and belong. Liara must have felt my mood shift. What are you thinking about? She asked. I was thinking about how glad I am that I came here. I said. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts. I said. The hard parts made me who I am. Tess made a sound of agreement. The hard parts are where the growth happens. They said, comfort is the enemy of progress. I smiled. When did you become a philosopher? Since I met you. They said, you are a bad influence. We laughed. 3 beings from 3 different worlds, sharing a moment of connection under the light of distant stars. This was what I had fought for. Not just a victory in an arena, but a place where I belonged. And I had found it. I started visiting the training yard regularly. Not to prepare for a fight, but to maintain my skills. Master Silent had taught me that combat was like language. If you did not use it, you lost it. So I practiced. I sparred with students from different species, learning their styles, adapting to their strengths. Each session taught me something new. A Xylos showed me how to fight without relying on sight. A Ventari taught me to read body language as a combat tool. A Gravitan demonstrated how to use 3-dimensional space in ways I had never imagined. I was becoming a better fighter. But more importantly, I was becoming a better student of the universe. Every species had something to teach. Every being had a perspective worth understanding. I thought about what Vorath had said. About humans not earning their place. He was wrong. But not entirely. Humans had not earned their place through strength or longevity. But they were earning it. Day by day. Student by student. Through determination and adaptability and the willingness to learn. That was what made humans special. I realized. Not our physical abilities. Our ability to grow, to change, to become something new. I was proof of that. The girl who had left New Hope, scared and uncertain, had become someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who belonged. But I had not done it alone. I had done it with the help of a dozen species. 100 friends. 1,000 small acts of kindness and support. The academy was not a place where individuals proved themselves. It was a place where beings came together to help each other become more than they could be alone. And that was the most important lesson of all. I returned to my quarters that evening and found a message waiting for me. It was from Vorath, inviting me to join a study group he was organizing for the upcoming diplomatic exercise. I smiled. Some things really did change. I accepted the invitation. The next morning, I walked into the study group and sat down across from my former enemy. He nodded at me. I nodded back. We were not friends, but we were something, and that something was enough. I realized that the academy was not a competition. It was a collaboration. We were not here to prove who was best, we were here to learn from each other. To grow together. To build bridges between species. The trial had taught me that lesson more powerfully than any lecture could. I was not just a student anymore. I was a bridge between my species and the stars. The second semester began with new energy. I walked into each class with confidence I had not possessed months earlier. The academy was no longer a place I visited. It was my home. I wrote to my family at the end of the semester. The letter was long, filled with stories and descriptions and emotions that I had been holding in for months. I told them about the trial, about Liara and Thes and Master Silen, about Vorith, and how the biggest bully had become an unlikely ally. I told them that I had found my place. Not despite the challenges, but because of them. My mother wrote back. She said that my father had cried when he read about the trial. Not tears of fear, but tears of pride. She said that my little brother had started talking about applying to the academy himself. She said that the whole colony was proud of me. I read the letter 3 times, letting the words sink in. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in my drawer, next to the acceptance letter that had started this journey. The second semester began. New classes, new challenges, new opportunities. I walked into xenopolitical theory on the first day and saw Vorith sitting in the front row. He nodded at me. I nodded back. We were not friends, but we were something. The professor, an elderly Aquilon with feathers streaked with silver, began the lecture. I took out my datapad and started taking notes. Outside the window, the stars were bright and endless. I thought about the girl on New Hope who had looked up at the sky and wondered if she belonged among them. She did. She always had. She just needed to prove it to herself. The academy stretched before me. Years of learning and growth and discovery. I did not know what the future held, but I knew one thing with certainty. I was ready. Whatever came next, I would face it. Not because I was the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but because I had learned that the only limits that mattered were the ones I accepted. And I was done accepting limits. I was Kira Vance, human, student of the Galactic Concord Academy. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The semester ended with a ceremony in the main hall. Students from every species gathered to celebrate the completion of their first term. Speeches were given. Awards were distributed. I received a commendation for outstanding achievement in xenocultural studies. When my name was called, I walked to the stage and accepted the certificate with trembling hands. I thought about my parents. Watching the ceremony via holographic feed from New Hope, I thought about my little brother, who had started preparing his own academy application. I thought about every human who would come after me, who would benefit from the path I was helping to carve. After the ceremony, I found a quiet corner and sat down, the certificate in my hands. Liara found me, as she always did. "Why are you hiding?" she asked. "I am not hiding," I said. "I am processing." She sat beside me. "Process faster," she said. "Thes is organizing a celebration, and they need the guest of honor." I laughed. "I am not the guest of honor. You are," she said. "You are the human who stood up to a Carthian and won. That makes you a legend." "I do not want to be a legend," I said. "I want to be a student." "That is exactly what a legend would say," she said, pulling me to my feet. I let her drag me to the celebration. The room was full of students. Music, food, laughter. I saw Vorith standing in a corner, talking with a group of students from various species. He caught my eye and raised his cup. I raised mine back. The semester was over, but my journey was just beginning. I had come to the academy to learn about the stars. I had learned about myself instead. And that, I realized, was the whole point. The stars were just the backdrop. The real journey was inward. The real discovery was the strength you did not know you had. I was Kira Vance, human, student, warrior, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The second semester would start in a week. I was already looking forward to it. I looked out at the starfield one last time before leaving the ceremony. The stars were the same ones I had watched from New Hope. But they looked different now. Closer. More familiar. I was no longer looking up at them from a distant colony. I was living among them. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning. The stars outside the viewport were the same ones I had gazed at as a child. But now I understood them differently. They were not distant points of light. They were neighborhoods waiting to be explored.